Suffering makes us blessed, but that does not mean that it is a blessing from God. Suffering, whether it be due to illness or persecution or natural disasters or the state of the economy, is the result of the fallenness of the world. Suffering is evidence that this world is broken, and so it should not be seen primarily as something positive that God has willed and which we must thank him for. But suffering still does make us blessed, because it leads us to look beyond this world and yearn for another one. It leads us to care less for temporal things and care more for eternal things. And when we suffer, it proves that we are at enmity with the fallen world, which is essential for a Christian. Now, that is why in the Apostle Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, he says in chapter 11 that his credentials as an apostle are not being skilled in speech and having Jewish ethnicity, but his sufferings. His legitimacy as an apostle is proven and demonstrated by the trials and tribulations he has endured, because they prove that he is not of this world and that there is a conflict between him and the world. Paul, defending his apostleship against the false apostles who have been trying to lead the Corinthians astray, says, "Are they servants of Christ? I'm a better one." I'm talking like a madman, as in it's foolish of him to boast, but he's going to boast nonetheless. "I have far greater labors, far more imprisonments, with countless beatings and often near death. 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews the 40 lashes less than one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea, on frequent journeys and dangers from rivers, dangers from robbers, danger from my own people, danger from Gentiles, danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers, in toil and hardship through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. And apart from other things, there is the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. Who is weak and I am not weak? Who is made to fall and I am not indignant?" It is because Paul has had these struggles that his apostleship is confirmed. If he had no struggles, if he faced no opposition, if he was perfectly comfortable and happy in this world, if he and the world were at harmony with one another, then there would be reason to doubt that he was a true representative of Jesus Christ. Because Jesus Christ said, "If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. And in the world you will have tribulation." And of course, Jesus began his ministry by saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who hunger." Now, why is it that being poor in spirit and mourning and being hungry makes us blessed? Why is it that Paul's toil and hardship and sleepless nights and hunger and thirst and being cold and exposed and having constant anxiety made him blessed? Well, it's because, as he said in chapter 4 of the same letter, though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For our affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. When we suffer, it forces us to place our hopes not in the transient or temporal or finite things of this life, but to the eternal things of the next life. When we suffer, it puts us at enmity with the world. It makes us become out of step with the world. It makes us dissatisfied with the world. And it makes us hunger and thirst for another world. And that is exactly how it should be. Christians are fundamentally not supposed to be satisfied or happy with the way things are in the world. We are supposed to see the world as corrupt and fallen, as subjected to futility, as needing restoration and renewal. We are supposed to see the devil as having become, in some sense, the ruler of this world, or even the god of this world, as Paul describes him in this same letter. We are supposed to be like Christ, who suffered in this world, who was oppressed by this world, who wept over this world, who came to save the world and undo all the suffering of the world, who came so that one day every tear will be wiped away and death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away, and all things will be made new, as the book of Revelation tells us. So when we suffer, we become like Christ. When we suffer, we are forced to look for joy in the heavenly realm, and thus we find a lasting joy that this world could never give us. Suffering wakes us up from our dream. It breaks our illusion. It snaps us out of our trance, and thus it makes us blessed. But, and this is crucial, this does not mean that our suffering is a blessing from God. And it depends on how one understands that phrase. But a certain way of understanding that phrase is definitely incorrect. Suffering makes us blessed, but it is not, strictly speaking, a blessing. The suffering we endure is not directly caused by God, but by the world, which is the very opposite of God. We suffer and endure because of the world's subjection to darkness and death and sin. God is not the creator of those things. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. He is the author of life, not death. He is the originator of holiness, not sin. Suffering is not caused by God. It is not created at all. It is caused by the fallen condition of the world. It does not therefore even have a cause, strictly speaking, because suffering is the result of things that have no existence. Death was never created. It is not a thing in itself. Death is simply the absence of life. Sin was never created because it is simply the absence of goodness. Now, yes, God is sovereign, and his providence does mean that he permits suffering. He does foresee suffering, and he does permit suffering, and he does even in some sense guide and direct the events that cause our suffering, because he restrains some occasions of suffering and he permits other occasions of suffering. One day he prevents a volcano from erupting and destroying everyone in Auckland City, but the next day he permits a tsunami that wreaks havoc on people's homes and lives. But he's not the cause of suffering. So while he permits murders to happen, he's not the one doing the murdering. He foresaw and permitted the Texas floods that happened recently to happen. But it would be wrong to say that because he permitted it, that God drowned the people who died in that flood. That would be very inaccurate to say that. No. The reason why many people tragically drowned in that flood was because of the fallen state of the world. It was not because God directly and personally killed them. That's not what happened. It was because the world is subjected to futility that it has floods that kill people. God permitted that, but he did not directly or personally do it. Now, speaking of that terrible flood, we can say of the many parents who, of course, mourn the tragic loss of those girls who were drowned in that Christian girls' camp, that those parents, because they mourn, are blessed in some sense. We can say of them, blessed are they who mourn, blessed are they who are poor in spirit. But it would be wrong to say that God blessed them by killing their daughters. This isn't something that we want to say of God. It is wrong to say that their beloved daughters, when they were swept away by the rushing water and then drowned or killed by being struck with debris, was a blessing to them. No. The parents are blessed, not because their daughter's dying was a blessing, but because by mourning and suffering, they have entered a state of spiritual transcendence where they are emotionally and spiritually at odds with the world and yearn for another world, and are thus made more holy, more saintly, more heavenly. They have been elevated above this world and set their sights on heaven. That makes them blessed. They are in a state of blessedness as a moral category. They have the moral state of blessedness because they are forced to not look for satisfaction in this life. Now, recently, a friend of mine had something terrible happen to him. It was one of the worst things that can happen to a person. I won't say what it was because I don't want to give away who he is, but it was a terrible thing. And it was one of those things that has no positive outcome. There was just nothing good about it. Okay, there's no silver lining to what he went through. It was entirely a horrible thing. And I was talking to him, and I asked him how he was doing. And he said, "I'm feeling so grateful and so joyful." And it seemed to me, and maybe I've misunderstood him, but in any case, it leads to a good point. It seemed to me that he was almost forcing himself to say that. It seemed to me that he felt like he had to say that. He had to be grateful for every single thing that he encounters in his life, and so he had to be grateful somehow for this horrible thing that happened to him. But I don't agree with that. Now, I didn't say that to him, of course. That would be pastorally improper. But to make a point for you, I don't agree with that mentality. I think that mentality can be emotionally and spiritually damaging. It's almost a form of doublethink. His religious education has forced him to think that even if this horrible, tragic thing happens to him, he somehow has to feel grateful that it happened. And what this can often do is seriously hurt one's relationship with God, because it can lead them to see God as someone who personally and directly inflicts pain on you, or as someone who personally and directly kills your children and then demands that you thank him for it. This is not true. When Jesus saw a mother who was mourning and lamenting the death of her son, he did not expect her to be grateful that he was dead. Instead, he resurrected her son. Jesus permitted Lazarus, his friend, to die, but then he wept when he saw Lazarus' grave. Jesus did not kill Lazarus. He resurrected Lazarus. If we are to attribute Lazarus' death directly to God just as much as his resurrection, then we would have to praise God for Lazarus' death just as much as for his resurrection. When Lazarus' sisters lamented their brother's loss to Jesus, he would have said, "How ungrateful of you to lament. Can't you see that by killing your brother I blessed you?" But that's not how he reacted. Instead, he blessed them by undoing Lazarus' death, by raising him back to life. And it's for doing that that he was praised. Should Jesus have been thanked for giving people blindness? No, he was thanked for giving the blind sight. It is the state of the world, it is the death that has corrupted the cosmos that causes blindness to happen. And God's mission is to one day stop that from happening so that there won't be blindness anymore. God permits blindness to happen, but he also will provide a permanent solution to it. However, blindness can make someone blessed by causing them to focus their desires on God and not on a world that cannot give them true satisfaction and joy. You see, if we feel obligated to thank God for our suffering and see all suffering as a blessing, see it as something good, then we would actually end up having to see this world as being good in its current state. We'd have to see death and sickness and poverty and war and all these things as something good. But that's not how we're supposed to see it. Christianity has a fundamentally negative view of the current state of things. We do see the world positively to the extent that it was created by God and originally created very good, but we must also see it negatively on account of its subjection to an evil ruler, the devil, and its consequent fallen and corrupt condition. And when we encounter suffering in this world, we turn to God, not to thank him for the suffering, not to attribute suffering to him, but to pray to him for the world's healing. We turn to God to resolve the problem, to undo the suffering, to give sight to the blind, to give life to the dead. When my son Basil was in hospital for 2 weeks after having a series of strokes and seizures, I think it would have seriously harmed my relationship with God and made me feel very distant from him if I felt obligated to attribute what happened to Basil directly to God and to thank him for it. No, what happened to Basil was not a blessing. But what it did do was force me to get down on my knees and shed tears and beg and plead God to heal his brain. It forced me to place all my hopes on God. And it was because of that Basil's suffering and my suffering made me blessed. And when Basil's brain did fully heal, and the doctors told us how shocked they were that had happened, it was then that I thanked God. Now, of course, for some of us, we don't get such good news. For some Christians, their own beautiful daughters were drowned while they were staying in a Christian camp. But they will also thank God when in the world to come, their daughters are raised to everlasting life and brought back to them. When this world is renewed and liberated from its captivity to suffering, then we shall thank God for all eternity. In that world, we won't need suffering to make us blessed, because we will be with God already, for he shall be all in all. Amen.
Amen.